My ex-husband and his new wife showed up at my son's school, trying to humiliate me for being a single mom. But when they saw who was waiting for me in the car, their faces turned pale. The air outside my son's school was crisp, filled with the lively chatter of parents waiting for their kids. The scent of autumn leaves mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee from a food truck parked nearby. It should have been a regular day, just another school event where I cheered for my son Noah like any proud mother. But life, as I had come to learn, had a twisted sense of humor. I had just finished speaking with Noah's teacher when a familiar voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Would you look at that, Samantha?" The voice rang out loud enough for half the schoolyard to hear. Some people just never move on. Life has a way of testing us, but in the end, strength always prevails. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced challenges and come out stronger, consider subscribing. Together we celebrate resilience, empowerment, and the victories that truly matter. Now let's dive in. David, my ex-husband. His words were laced with mockery, carrying the smugness I had once been too blind to see. My body stiffened, every muscle tensing in anticipation of whatever cruel show he was about to put on. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Standing beside him was his new wife, Samantha, dressed in designer clothes that screamed wealth, her manicured fingers resting on his arm as if staking her claim. They looked like they had stepped straight out of a high society magazine, a perfectly curated couple. Me. I was just the woman they had discarded, the single mother struggling to make ends meet. David smirked as he took a step closer, making sure his voice carried. "Still doing the whole, independent single mom thing? Must be exhausting." His tone was dripping with condescension, his eyes scanning me like I was nothing more than a relic of his past. A small crowd had already started to gather. Parents, teachers, even some of the older students. The humiliation burned through me like fire, but I refused to let it show. I straightened my back, lifting my chin slightly. "I'm here for Noah," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That's all that matters." Samantha let out a fake laugh, tilting her head as if genuinely amused. "Oh, of course. It must be nice to have something to focus on since, well, you don't really have much else going on, do you?" My fingers curled into fists at my sides. This wasn't just an attack on me, it was a calculated performance, meant to paint me as weak, as pitiful. And they were enjoying every second of it. "I don't know how you do it," David continued, shaking his head. "Juggling work, parenting, bills, all alone. But hey, at least you're trying, right?" There was the final jab. The reminder that he had moved on to someone wealthier, someone who could provide him with a lifestyle I never could. I felt my breath hitch, but before I could respond, a teacher's voice interrupted. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, this is a school event. Perhaps we should keep things civil." David barely spared the teacher a glance, his focus locked on me. "Oh, we are being civil. Just checking in on Mia. After all, it's not easy being alone. No husband, no real success. But hey, she's trying. Isn't that right, sweetheart?" The words hit like a slap. My entire life had been reduced to a joke, a spectacle for them to enjoy. The murmurs around us grew, some sympathetic, some entertained. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I forced a smile. "You're right about one thing, David. I've been trying. But I think you're about to realize that you underestimated me." For the first time, the confidence in his eyes flickered. A small shift, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Samantha, however, wasn't done. "Oh, Mia, don't be so sensitive. We just want the best for Noah. Maybe if you weren't so busy struggling, you could actually give him the life he deserves." A sharp inhale. A cold rush of anger. She had crossed the line. My son, my world, was now part of their cruel game. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. "You don't get to talk about what's best for my child." My voice was steady, calm, but every syllable was edged with warning. "Noah is happy. He is loved. And unlike some people, I don't need to tear others down to feel important." Samantha's smile faltered. David stiffened. And then, as if the universe had impeccable timing, a sleek black luxury car pulled up to the curb. I turned to look and my heart pounded, not in fear but in anticipation. The driver stepped out first, dressed sharply, his presence exuding power. And then the car door opened, and out stepped a man who carried himself with effortless confidence. James. His eyes met mine, warm and knowing, and in that moment I knew I wasn't just here to defend myself anymore. I was here to win. The crowd's whispers grew louder. David and Samantha exchanged a glance, confusion creeping into their expressions. "Who is that?" Samantha asked, her voice quieter now, lacking its earlier bravado. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the tension before finally answering. "Oh," I said, tilting my head slightly. That's the person waiting for me in the car." And just like that, the air around us shifted. David's face drained of color. Samantha's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on her designer bag. For the first time, they weren't the ones in control. For the first time, they were the ones caught off guard. And I wasn't done yet. I turned to James, smiling. "Shall we?" He returned the smile, stepping closer. "Whenever you're ready." The crowd was silent now, all eyes on us. And David? He looked like he had just seen a ghost. David's expression was frozen in place, his eyes flicking between me and James like he was trying to piece together a puzzle he had never even considered before. Samantha, usually so composed, had lost her usual smugness. Her grip on David's arm had tightened, her fingers digging into his sleeve as though she could somehow anchor herself back into control. But it was too late. The power had shifted. James, effortlessly confident, adjusted his cufflinks as if he had all the time in the world. He turned to me with an easy smile, completely ignoring the stunned onlookers. "So, do you want to stay and entertain them, or are we heading out?" His voice was smooth, casual, but there was something else beneath it. A quiet authority that made everyone around us take notice. I let the silence stretch, savoring the way David's confidence crumbled in real time. He had spent years painting me as a struggling single mother, someone barely scraping by, someone easy to pity. And now, right in front of his eyes, I was something else entirely. I finally spoke, my voice steady. "I think I've spent enough time here." James nodded, placing his hand lightly on the small of my back as he guided me toward the car. The gesture was subtle, but it sent a clear message. One David and Samantha understood all too well. I wasn't alone. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't someone they could toy with anymore. But just as I reached for the door handle, David found his voice. "Wait." It wasn't the confident, taunting tone he had used earlier. It was strained. Almost unsure. I turned back slowly, raising an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" David's mouth opened and closed as if he was struggling to find the right words. "Who is he?" The question came out more clipped than he probably intended. James chuckled, but he didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, letting me decide how much I wanted to reveal. I let the moment linger before finally speaking. "James and I go way back." I saw the flicker of confusion on David's face before I continued. "We met years ago, before everything." I let my gaze settle on Samantha then, watching as realization began to dawn in her eyes. David frowned. "And now what? You're dating him?" I tilted my head slightly. "Does it matter?" Samantha's voice was sharper now, her insecurity slipping through. "It's just a little surprising, that's all. We didn't know you had someone." The hesitation in her voice was almost amusing. James, still perfectly composed, finally spoke. "Some people don't need to broadcast their relationships for attention." He said it lightly, but the meaning was clear. David and Samantha had spent years flaunting their relationship, using it as a way to humiliate me. And now the roles were reversed. David exhaled sharply. He stopped himself, then shook his head. "I just don't get it. You never mentioned him before." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Why would I? You never cared about my life after you left. You were too busy proving how much better off you were without me." The sting in my words landed exactly where I wanted them to. David flinched, his jaw tightening. Samantha, desperate to regain control, folded her arms. "So what is he? A lawyer? A business owner?" She tried to sound casual, but the unease in her voice was unmistakable. James let out a low chuckle, his expression amused. "I own a few businesses, yes." David's gaze sharpened. "Which ones?" James shrugged as if the details weren't important. "You might have heard of them." That was the moment Samantha's face paled. He had heard of him. Recognition flickered across her expression, and I knew she was beginning to connect the dots. James wasn't just someone from my past. He was someone important. David, oblivious to her reaction, pressed on. "So you two are together?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to sit with the uncertainty. Finally, I said, James has been in my life for a long time. Unlike some people, he actually values me. The words landed with precision. Samantha glanced at David then, her grip on his arm loosening. It was subtle, but I noticed. He was seeing him in a different light now. For the first time, she was realizing that the man she had chosen, the man she had helped destroy my life, wasn't as untouchable as she once believed. David exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. This wasn't how I thought things would go. I laughed softly. Oh, I know. There was something deeply satisfying about watching the man who had once shattered me now grappling with his own emotions. For years I had let him dictate the narrative. I had allowed him to make me feel small. But today, here in front of everyone, the power dynamic had shifted. I turned back toward the car, placing my hand on the door handle. I think we're done here. David took a step forward. Mia, wait. I glanced over my shoulder. Why? He hesitated. I didn't expect this. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't expect me to move on? To be happy? To be with someone who actually respects me? His silence was answer enough. Samantha cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. We should go, David. He hesitated for a moment longer before finally nodding. Yeah. As they turned to leave, I called out one last time. Oh, and David? He stopped, looking back. I smiled. Next time you try to humiliate me, make sure I'm actually the one losing. Samantha practically dragged him away, her grip on his arm firm. I watched as they disappeared into the crowd, whispers following them. James stepped closer, his voice low. That went well. I exhaled, a slow smile forming. Better than I could have planned. He opened the car door for me, and as I slid inside, I caught one last glimpse of David and Samantha. Their world wasn't as perfect as they wanted people to believe. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had truly won. As the car pulled away, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. As the car pulled away from the school, my fingers traced invisible patterns on my lap. The satisfaction of watching David and Samantha crumble in front of me still lingered, but beneath it was something else. A simmering storm of emotions that had been buried for too long. I had won the battle, but something in me whispered that the war wasn't over. Not yet. James drove in silence for a few moments, his gaze occasionally flicking toward me as if gauging my thoughts. Finally he spoke, his voice smooth but laced with curiosity. That felt good, didn't it? I exhaled, leaning my head back against the seat. Better than I expected. He chuckled, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. David looked like he saw a ghost. The image replayed in my mind, and I couldn't deny the rush of satisfaction. He never saw it coming, I murmured, shaking my head. He thought I'd always be stuck in the past. Struggling. Alone. James' expression darkened slightly. He wanted you to stay in that place because it made him feel superior. I nodded, staring out the window. He was always like that. Even when we were together. I just didn't see it then. James made a thoughtful noise, but he didn't press further. He had always been like that, letting me come to my own realizations without forcing them. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that allowed thoughts to settle, emotions to process. But the moment we pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. I frowned, reaching for it. A message. From David. David, we need to talk. I stared at the screen, a mixture of amusement and irritation bubbling up inside me. Now he wanted to talk? James leaned over slightly, catching a glimpse of the message. Let me guess. He suddenly has something important to say. I let out a small laugh. Predictable, isn't he? James leaned back against his seat, shaking his head. He's scrambling. He thought he had the upper hand all these years, and now he doesn't know how to handle losing control. I considered ignoring the message altogether, but something inside me, curiosity maybe or a lingering need for closure, made me type back. About what? The response was immediate. David, it's not something I want to say over text. Can we meet? Just for a few minutes. I hesitated. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but at the same time, there was a part of me that wanted to see just how much he was unraveling. James must have noticed my hesitation because he spoke up. If you want to meet him, I'll go with you. I shook my head. I think I need to do this alone. He studied me for a moment before nodding. All right. But I'll be close. There was something reassuring in that. I texted David back, agreeing to meet him at a nearby cafe in an hour. The moment I hit send, a strange feeling settled in my chest. A mix of anticipation and wariness. Whatever David had to say, I knew it wouldn't be simple. The cafe was warm, the scent of coffee and pastries filling the air. I spotted David the moment I walked in. He was sitting at a corner table, his posture tense, fingers tapping rhythmically against the tabletop. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap. All right. You wanted to talk. So talk. David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I didn't expect to see you with someone like him. I raised an eyebrow. That's what you called me here for? To talk about James. His jaw tightened. I thought things were different. I let out a dry laugh. Of course you did. You thought I'd always be struggling, always looking over my shoulder while you and Samantha played happy family. He flinched but didn't deny it. It's not like that. I leaned back in my chair. Then what is it like, David? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're just upset that I didn't stay broken. His fingers curled into fists. It's not about that, he said, voice strained. It's about Noah. That caught my attention. What about him? David hesitated, then sighed. Samantha. She thinks I should go for full custody. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Excuse me. She thinks it's what's best for him, he continued, his voice carefully measured. She says he'd have a more stable life with us. That we can give him more. Anger flared inside me, sharp and burning. Stable. I repeated, my voice quiet but laced with fury. You barely even see him, David. And now, suddenly, you want to rip him away from me? He looked away. It's not like that. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Then what is it like? He exhaled slowly. Samantha, she's been pushing for it. She thinks we can offer him better opportunities. That you're too caught up in, he hesitated. Too caught up in what? I demanded. His jaw clenched. In your new life. The realization hit me like a slap. This wasn't about Noah. This was about control. About the fact that I was moving on, that I wasn't the woman he had left behind. I let out a slow, measured breath. You're not taking him from me. David's eyes flickered with something, regret maybe or frustration. I don't want to fight, Mia. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then don't. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, David rubbed a hand over his face. I didn't think you'd ever move on. I studied him, really studied him. For years I had thought of him as this invincible figure. Someone who had hurt me and walked away without consequence. But now I saw something else. A man who had spent so much time looking down on me that he had never considered the possibility that one day, I'd be standing taller than him. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Noah is staying with me. And if you even think about trying to take him, I will fight you with everything I have. David didn't answer right away. Then finally he sighed. I didn't expect this. I smiled, but there was steel behind it. You never did. And with that I walked away. As I stepped out of the cafe, the cold air wrapped around me, but inside I felt nothing but fire. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I stepped out of the cafe, the weight of David's words still lingered in my chest. But something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about custody. This was about control. David and Samantha didn't want what was best for Noah. They wanted to win. They wanted to take the one thing that kept me grounded, the one thing they thought would break me completely. But they had made a mistake. A grave one. They underestimated me. I inhaled deeply, the crisp air burning my lungs, but I welcomed it. I needed clarity and I needed to act fast. James was waiting for me in the car, his expression unreadable as I slid into the passenger seat. He didn't ask questions right away, simply watching as I processed the storm inside me. They're trying to take Noah, I finally said, my voice steady but laced with something colder than anger, determination. James sighed, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened. I had a feeling this wasn't over. I looked at him, my jaw tightening. They think I'm distracted. That I'm too caught up in my new life to fight them. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. Then they clearly don't know who they're dealing with. A small smile ghosted my lips. No, they don't. But they will. James studied me for a moment then nodded. So what's the plan? That was the thing, I didn't have a plan. Not yet. But I knew I needed to be careful. Custody battles were brutal and I couldn't afford to make a single misstep. For the next few days I worked in silence, gathering every piece of information I could. I dug through old emails, messages, financial records, anything that could paint a clear picture of who David really was. I wasn't going to fight him on emotions alone. I needed facts, proof that he wasn't the ideal father he pretended to be. And then, like a gift from the universe, something unexpected fell into my lap. An old friend from David's past, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out to me. Apparently, David had burned more bridges than I realized. This friend, Mark, had once been close to David, but things had soured between them. And now, Mark had something that could change everything. We met at a small diner away from prying eyes. Mark was nervous, shifting in his seat, glancing around as if expecting David to materialize out of nowhere. What I'm about to tell you, he started, lowering his voice, is something I should have spoken up about a long time ago. I leaned forward. I'm listening. Mark exhaled slowly, then pulled out his phone. David has been lying to everyone. You, Samantha, the court, even his own friends. I stiffened. What do you mean? He tapped a few buttons on his phone before turning the screen toward me. My stomach twisted as I read through a series of messages. They were from David, to another woman. A woman who wasn't Samantha. Mark continued, he's been seeing her for over a year. And that's not the worst part. He's been funneling money into a separate account, hiding assets, moving things around. I felt my pulse quicken. If this was true, it could be the break I needed. Mark watched me closely. I have more. Emails, transactions, even a few recorded calls. He's been setting himself up in case things with Samantha fall apart. I leaned back, exhaling sharply. And why are you telling me this? Mark's expression darkened. Because I know what kind of person he is. And I know he doesn't deserve custody of Noah. I've seen the way he treats people once he's done with them. I nodded slowly. And what do you want in return? Mark shook his head. Nothing. Just do what you have to do. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. I had everything I needed to dismantle David's perfect little world. I spent the next few days carefully compiling everything. James helped me, using his connections to verify details, ensuring that nothing could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. We built a case, not just against David's fitness as a parent, but against his credibility as a whole. And then when everything was perfectly in place, I made my move. David and Samantha had planned a grand dinner party at their house, a gathering of influential people. Lawyers, colleagues, even some of the parents from Noah's school. They wanted to show the world their perfect life, their stability. I decided to show up. Uninvited. The moment I walked through the doors, conversations stilled. Samantha's smile froze in place and David's grip on his wine glass tightened. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice low. I smiled, tilting my head slightly. Oh, I just thought I'd stop by. Catch up. Samantha stepped forward, her expression guarded. This isn't the place, Mia. I chuckled. Oh, but I think it is. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it onto the table between them. Go ahead. Open it. David hesitated before finally picking it up. The moment his eyes scanned the contents, his face lost all color. Samantha leaned in, her confusion turning to horror as she read the same documents. Bank transfers. Emails. Screenshots of conversations. Evidence of David's hidden life. The whispers around us grew louder. Samantha turned to him, her voice shaking. Is this true? David stammered, his usual arrogance crumbling. Samantha, listen, it's not what it looks like. I laughed softly. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like. Samantha's gaze snapped back to me, a mixture of anger and betrayal swirling in her eyes. You knew. I met her stare head-on. Not for long. But long enough. The room was silent now, all eyes on David. Samantha's face twisted with fury before she turned and in one swift motion, threw the contents of her wine glass in his face. Gasps erupted from the crowd. I leaned in close, just enough for only him to hear. You tried to take my son from me. Now you're going to lose everything. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out. The night air felt electrifying, the weight of years of humiliation lifting off my shoulders. James was waiting by the car, his expression unreadable. That was bold. I smirked. That was just the beginning. David had played his game. Now it was my turn. As I walked out of David and Samantha's grand dinner party, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. The night air felt crisp against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat of emotions still burning inside. I had delivered my final move, but I wasn't done watching the pieces fall exactly where they needed to. James leaned casually against the car, his hands in his pockets, his gaze steady as he watched me approach. That was quite the spectacle, he mused, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Samantha looked like she was about to combust. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. She just found out the perfect life she built was a lie. She's going to do one of two things: fight for David or destroy him. James tilted his head slightly as if considering the possibilities. I'd bet on the latter. I nodded. So would I. We got into the car, but I wasn't ready to drive away just yet. Instead, I turned in my seat, my fingers drumming lightly against the dashboard. Give it 20 minutes, I said, my eyes locked on the grand house through the rearview mirror. Then we'll see the real fallout. James chuckled but didn't argue. He knew I wasn't one to leave loose ends. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, the front door of the house burst open and Samantha stormed out. Even from this distance, I could see the pure fury radiating off her. She was gripping her phone in one hand, her expression twisted with rage as she tapped furiously at the screen. A few seconds later, David followed, looking disheveled, his face red with frustration. He tried grabbing her arm, but she yanked it away, shouting something I couldn't hear. I leaned back in my seat, satisfied. She's done with him. James let out a low whistle. That was fast. I shook my head. She never loved him. She loved the life he gave her. And now she realizes that life was a lie. As we watched, Samantha climbed into her car, slammed the door shut and sped off without looking back. David stood frozen in place for a moment before throwing his hands up in exasperation and storming back inside. I exhaled slowly, the reality of it all settling in. The man who had once humiliated me, torn my life apart, and tried to take my son away had just lost everything in the span of a single night. And the best part? It wasn't over yet. James turned the engine on, the low hum filling the quiet space. Where to now? I smiled, looking ahead. Home. I need to be with Noah. The drive was quiet, peaceful. Unlike the tension-filled nights I used to endure when David still held power over me, this felt different. This felt like freedom. When I arrived home, the house was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. Noah was already asleep, his small figure curled up beneath his blankets. I knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred slightly but didn't wake, his breathing steady. Everything I had done, every step, every decision had been for him. To ensure he would never grow up believing that power meant crushing others beneath you. That love was conditional. That his mother was weak. I pressed a soft kiss to his forehead and whispered, "We're safe now." But the peace didn't last long. The next morning I woke up to a barrage of missed calls. Most were from unknown numbers, but a few were from mutual acquaintances. People who had once sided with David, who had always believed his version of events. I hesitated before opening my messages. And then I saw it. A news article. Prominent businessman caught in scandal. Affair and hidden assets exposed. I blinked, rereading the headline twice. Then slowly I clicked on the link. David's name was plastered across the page, along with details I hadn't even uncovered myself. Apparently, after Samantha left, she wasted no time in going public with what she had learned. She had handed over every piece of evidence to the press, adding her own statements about how she had been blindsided by his deceit. It was brutal. It was messy. And it was exactly what David deserved. James called me a few minutes later, his voice laced with amusement. "Have you seen it?" I let out a breathless laugh. "Oh, I've seen it. Looks like you didn't even have to finish him off. Samantha did it for you." I shook my head, still processing the sheer speed at which everything had unraveled. She was never going to protect him. Not when it meant her reputation would be dragged down too. James hummed in agreement. "So what now?" "He's lost his business connections. His reputation is shot. He's about to go through an ugly split with Samantha. You think he'll still fight for Noah?" I grew serious at that. I don't think he has the fight left in him anymore. And I was right. A few days later, I received a formal email from David's lawyer. David is withdrawing his custody request. Just like that, the storm had passed. But the final blow came when I received a message from David himself. It was short, almost pitiful. "You really won, didn't you?" I stared at the words for a long time before typing back. "No, David. I just stopped losing." And with that, I blocked his number. For the first time in years, I was free. Not just from him, but from the weight of the past. As I stood outside that morning, the sun shining down on my face, I knew one thing for certain. This was the life I had fought for. A life where no one had power over me anymore. A life where my son could grow up knowing that strength wasn't about revenge but about resilience. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. The morning air felt different. Lighter. As if the weight that had pressed against my chest for years had finally lifted. The sun filtered through my window, casting golden streaks across my room, a visual reminder that I had stepped into a new chapter of my life. No more battles, no more fear, no more looking over my shoulder wondering what David's next move would be. He had made his final play and he had lost. I stretched, exhaling deeply before stepping into the hallway. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted in from the kitchen, and for a moment I simply stood there, letting myself soak in the quiet peace of my home. No tension, no impending disasters. Just normalcy. The kind of normalcy I had craved for so long. As I walked into the kitchen, I found Noah sitting at the table, his small hands curled around a cup of hot chocolate, his legs swinging back and forth under the chair. He looked up, smiling. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, sweetheart." I leaned down, pressing a kiss to the top of his head before grabbing my own cup of coffee. I sat down across from him, watching as he took small sips of his drink, the whipped cream leaving a tiny mustache on his upper lip. For years, I had worried about what all of this would do to him. Growing up in the middle of a broken family, watching his parents at odds, feeling the tension no child should have to bear. But now, looking at him, I realized something. He was happy. He was safe. And that was all that mattered. I reached across the table, gently wiping the whipped cream from his lip with my thumb. "Hey, Noah." He tilted his head. "Yeah. If you could go anywhere this weekend, where would you want to go?" His eyes lit up. "Anywhere. Anywhere." He thought for a moment, then grinned. "The beach. Can we go to the beach, Mom?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "The beach it is." His face broke into a beaming smile, and for a moment I just watched him, my heart swelling with gratitude. This was what I had fought for. This moment, this freedom. The ability to give my son the kind of life he deserved. One free from the influence of a man who had tried to break us. Just as I was finishing my coffee, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. A message. From James. "James, breakfast at the cafe?" "On me." I chuckled, shaking my head before typing back. "Me, only if I get extra whipped cream on my pancakes." His response was instant. "James, done. Be there in 30. I placed my phone down, feeling a warmth spread through me. James had been my rock through all of this. He had been patient, never pushing, never demanding. Just there, steady and unwavering. And though I had once feared letting someone in again, I couldn't deny what was happening between us. It was slow, unspoken, but undeniable. "Mom." Noah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up. "Yeah. Are we happy now?" His voice was small, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to ask. The question hit me harder than I expected. I reached across the table, taking his little hand in mine. "Yes, baby. We're happy now." And for the first time in years, I knew it was true. Later that morning, as we drove to the cafe, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror at Noah in the back seat. He was humming a song under his breath, his fingers drumming against the window as he stared out at the passing buildings. I turned my focus back to the road, my grip on the steering wheel tightening slightly. David was gone from our lives. But I knew there would always be moments, holidays, birthdays, school events, where he would try to reinsert himself. He was still Noah's father, and as much as I despised what he had done, I would never take that away from my son. But things would be different now. Noah and I were no longer at David's mercy. We were no longer the ones struggling to keep up while he dictated the terms of our lives. We were free. As I pulled into the cafe parking lot, I spotted James waiting outside, leaning against his car, his sunglasses perched on his nose. He looked up as I parked, a slow smile spreading across his lips as he saw us. I stepped out of the car and before I could say anything he held up a to-go cup. Extra whipped cream. Just as requested. I laughed, taking it from him. You're dangerously good at this. I learn quickly. Noah ran up beside me, grinning. Are we getting pancakes? James crouched down to his level, nodding. The biggest ones on the menu. Noah cheered, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward the entrance. Come on, Mom. We have to beat James to the best table. I let him drag me along, my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. As we sat down inside, I felt James' hand brush lightly against mine just for a second. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between us. A promise. Of healing. Of moving forward. Something new. I exhaled, smiling softly. For so long I had believed that revenge was the only way to find closure. That watching David's life crumble would be the moment I finally felt at peace. But now, sitting here with my son and the man who had stood by my side through it all, I realized something. Happiness was the best revenge. Not bitterness. Not anger. Just this. A life well lived. A future filled with love, with laughter, with endless possibilities. David had tried to break me. He had tried to take everything. But in the end I had won. Because I had chosen to move forward. And I wasn't looking back.